ballroom doors opened, and the entire room forgot how to breathe. It wasn't the rain hammering against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Grand Shilla Hotel that silenced 300 of Seoul's wealthiest people. It wasn't the lightning splitting the sky outside, or the orchestra that had just struck a wrong note. It was her, one woman, one white dress, and a little girl no taller than a willow branch holding her hand. Jae-hyun Park stood near the champagne display with a crystal glass frozen halfway to his lips. His jaw was still. His chest was not. Because the woman walking through those doors, unhurried, unafraid, chin lifted like she owned the very air in this room, was the woman he had destroyed 3 years ago. Sasha Brooks. She was more beautiful than he remembered. That was the cruelest part. He had spent 3 years quietly hoping time had been unkind to her, the way grief had been unkind to him. But no. She wore elegance the way other women wore jewelry, naturally, effortlessly, like it had always belonged to her. The white gown moved with her like water. Her skin glowed against it like polished ebony. She looked like something the world had finally decided to reward. The whispers started immediately. Is that Sasha Brooks? The one Jae-hyun divorced? Her company is worth $3 billion now. I read it in Forbes. She doesn't look like a woman who suffered a single day. Jae-hyun barely heard any of it, because his eyes had dropped, down to the little girl beside her, a child with big, curious eyes, scanning the glittering room with wonder, a child with Sasha's cheekbones, Sasha's graceful posture, and eyes, dark, sharp, slightly tilted at the corners, that Jae-hyun had seen every morning of his life in the mirror. The champagne glass slipped slightly in his grip. His business partner beside him, Director Kwon, leaned in and murmured, "Isn't that your ex-wife?" Jae-hyun said nothing. He was still staring at the child. The child, who could not have been older than 3, looked up at that moment, as if she felt his gaze, and stared directly at him across the crowded room. And Jae-hyun Park, billionaire CEO of Park Holdings, man who had never flinched in a boardroom war, felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. 3 years. He needed to go back 3 years to understand how he had arrived at this moment. Breathless, guilty, shaking inside a suit that cost more than most people earned in a year, staring at a child who wore his face. Sasha had come into his world quietly. That was what he remembered most about her, the quiet. In a life full of noise, of power plays and shareholder meetings, and his mother's razor-sharp opinions, Sasha had been something rare. She was a Nigerian-born economist, brilliant and composed, who had been working as a consultant for an international trade summit in Seoul when they met. He had been rude to her in a meeting, dismissive the way powerful men often were when they felt threatened by intelligence they hadn't expected. She had corrected him in front of 12 executives without raising her voice. He had asked her to dinner that same evening. They married within a year. And then the war began. Madame Park, his mother, the matriarch of the Park Empire, had never forgiven him for it. Not because Sasha was unworthy, but because Sasha was African. Because Sasha had her own voice. Because Sasha refused to disappear into the background the way the Park women were expected to. Madame Park had wanted a daughter-in-law she could shape. Instead, she got one she couldn't break. "She is using you," his mother had said over and over, in that quiet, surgical way she delivered her cruelest opinions. "Women like her see men like you and calculate every move. She doesn't love you, Jae-hyun. She loves what you can give her." He had defended Sasha then. He had. But the seeds had been planted. And Mina Choi, his ex-mistress, a woman he had cut ties with before the marriage, had made sure those seeds were watered every single day. The photos arrived first, grainy but convincing. Sasha at a hotel. Sasha entering a room with another man. Mina had delivered them personally to Jae-hyun's office with tears in her eyes, playing the wounded friend who didn't want to cause pain. Then came the financial irregularities. His accounting team flagging transfers that appeared to originate from Sasha's personal accounts, draining funds through shell companies, documents, signatures, a paper trail that looked airtight. He should have investigated. He knew that now. God, he knew that. But his mother's voice had been in his head for months by then, and Mina's tears had been so convincing, and his pride, that suffocating iron pride, had refused to let him sit with the possibility that he might simply be wrong. Their 5th anniversary dinner had been the breaking point, a private event, but cameras from 3 media outlets were present because his PR team had arranged coverage for the charity pledge he planned to announce. He hadn't planned for it to become what it became. Sasha had noticed something was wrong the moment she sat down. She'd reached for his hand across the table. He'd pulled away. "Jae-hyun," she'd said softly, "you've been cold for weeks. Talk to me. Please." He'd looked at her then, truly looked, and the anger that had been building for months had broken through the surface. "Don't." His voice had been low, controlled, and devastating. "Don't perform the caring wife tonight. Not in front of these people." She'd frowned. "Perform? What are you talking about?" "The accounts, Sasha." He'd slid a sealed folder across the table. "The transfers. The photos. Did you think I wouldn't find out?" The color had drained from her face. Not in guilt, he realized now, but in shock. Pure, disbelieving shock. "What photos? What transfers? Jae-hyun, I don't know what any of this—" "Stop!" He'd stood up, right there, in front of executives and cameras, and his mother sitting 3 seats away with quiet satisfaction in her eyes. "I've had lawyers review everything. The evidence is clear. This marriage is over." "Jae-hyun," her voice had cracked, just once. "Please, look at me. You know me. I would never— I thought I knew you." The cameras had caught it all. The divorce papers had been filed the next morning. By nightfall, the story was everywhere. Park, billionaire divorces foreign wife over financial scandal. Sasha's name had been dragged through every tabloid in Korea. She had left the mansion that same night in the rain, alone, with 2 suitcases and a dignity that had shamed him in retrospect. She hadn't screamed. She hadn't begged beyond that one moment. She had simply looked at him one last time at the door, eyes full of something that wasn't anger, and he had never been able to name it. And then she was gone. He hadn't known she was pregnant. He hadn't known because he hadn't given her the chance to tell him. Now Jae-hyun set his champagne glass down carefully on the nearest tray before he dropped it, and watched Sasha Brooks move through his world again, this time as its conqueror. She was surrounded within minutes. Chairman Lee of Dazen Group nearly knocked over a waiter rushing to greet her. The Deputy Minister of Trade shook her hand with both of his. Young executives, who had once whispered about the African woman who'd married above her station, were now practically queuing for the opportunity to be photographed beside her. Her skincare and fashion brand, Amara, named after her daughter, had exploded across 14 countries. 3 billion in valuation. A flagship store opening in Gangnam next week. She wasn't just back in Seoul. She had arrived. And through all of it, Sasha remained composed, gracious, warm. She laughed at the right moments and deflected compliments with intelligence. She was the kind of woman who made everyone in the room feel that speaking to her was a privilege they had somehow earned. Jae-hyun watched from a distance, and something in his chest pulled tighter with every passing minute. He crossed the room. He didn't decide to. His legs simply moved. The crowd parted for him out of habit. When he finally stood in front of her, close enough to see the faint gold in her earrings and the steady calm in her eyes, he opened his mouth. Sasha beat him to it. "Good evening, Mr. Park." Not Jae-hyun. Mr. Park. 2 words that cut more cleanly than any insult ever could. The formality of a stranger. The distance of a woman who had decided he was no longer worth emotional energy. He stood there for half a second too long. "Sasha, you're looking well," she said, and her tone was perfectly pleasant, perfectly neutral, like she was commenting on the weather to an acquaintance she'd met once at a conference. Then she turned to the man beside her, tall, broad-shouldered, familiar, and said, "Daniel, you remember Director Min? He was asking about our distribution logistics." Her cousin. Daniel Brooks. The man gave Jae-hyun a look that contained about 7 different kinds of fury, all of them controlled. Jae-hyun stood there, dismissed, while she spoke to someone else. He had signed documents dissolving empires. He had fired vice presidents without blinking. He had sat across tables from men who wanted to destroy his company and stared them into submission. Nothing, not one thing in his professional or personal life had ever made him feel as small as those 2 words. "Good evening, Mr. Park." Then the little girl tugged at Sasha's gown. "Mommy." Her voice was a bright, clear bell, cutting through the low murmur of the ballroom. "Mommy, who's that man? He keeps looking at us." The people nearby went quiet. Sasha looked down at her daughter with an expression Jae-hyun couldn't quite read. Something between love and sorrow and fierce, protective calm. "He's no one you need to worry about, baby." Jae-hyun's throat closed. He walked away before anyone could see his face. He spent the rest of the gala at the edge of the room, barely speaking, watching Sasha laugh, watching Amara fall asleep against her mother's shoulder, small fingers curled into the white fabric, watching the way Sasha stroked the child's back without even thinking about it, automatic, instinctual, the gesture of a woman who had been doing this alone for 3 years. He drove home in silence that night, sat in his office until 3 in the morning, opened his desk drawer, the bottom left one, the one his assistant knew never to touch, and looked at the photograph he had kept there since the night she left. Sasha at their wedding, laughing. Real, full laughter, the kind she reserved for moments she forgot she was being watched. He closed the drawer. Then he called his chief investigator. "I need you to reopen the investigation from 3 years ago," he said. "The financial records, the photographs, everything. I want the original source documents. I want to know who touched them." "Sir, that case was closed. Open it." It took 2 weeks. 2 weeks during which Sasha launched her Korean flagship store to enormous fanfare, and Jae-hyun attended the opening from across the street, standing outside in a coat with his collar turned up like a man who had somehow become a ghost in his own city. 2 weeks during which Amara was photographed laughing at the store launch, and every major Korean newspaper ran the image. The heiress of Amara, 3 years old, already charming the nation. 2 weeks during which the guilt built in Jae-hyun's chest like water behind a dam. His investigator, a quiet former intelligence officer named Mr. Baek, delivered the findings on a Tuesday morning in a manila folder that Jae-hyun stared at for a long time before opening. The transfer documents, Baek said carefully, were created using a software template that didn't exist until 8 months after the date printed on them. The metadata confirms it. They were fabricated. Jae-hyun's hand tightened on the folder. The photographs were staged. The man in them is a professional model hired through a private agency. The agency's payment records show a wire transfer from a shell company that traces back to, with some work, Mina Choi's personal holdings. The room was very quiet. "There's more," Beck said. "One of your former household staff, a woman named Mrs. O, who retired the year after the divorce, she kept a journal. She's willing to give a statement. She says she personally witnessed Ms. Choi and Madam Park having a private meeting 3 days before the anniversary dinner. She heard Madam Park say, and I quote, Make sure it happens publicly. He needs to see it happen publicly, so he can't take it back. Jae-hyun stood up. He walked to the window. He looked out at Seoul, his city, his kingdom, and felt it mean nothing. Mina, he said her name like he was pulling a blade out of something. Yes, sir. He turned. And my mother? Beck was quiet for a moment. Aware, from the beginning. It wasn't grief that came first. It was a rage so cold and clean, it almost felt like clarity. He had destroyed an innocent woman. He had taken her life apart in public, in front of cameras, in front of people who had then spent months gleefully repeating the story. He had divorced a pregnant woman, pregnant with his child, and called her a criminal. He had done this. Not Mina alone. Not his mother alone. Him. Because he had chosen pride over proof. Because he had looked at the woman who loved him and decided, when it mattered most, that she was probably guilty. He confronted Mina that evening in her apartment. She opened the door expecting something else. Maybe a reconciliation, the way their toxic cycle had always worked. What she got instead was Jae-hyun standing in her doorway with the folder under his arm and an expression she had never seen on him before. Tell me the truth, he said. Right now. All of it. Mina's face moved through 3 different expressions in 2 seconds. Then she settled on defiance. Everything I did. Because you belonged with me. She wasn't right for you. Your own mother said so. My mother. His voice didn't rise. That was the terrifying part. My mother helped you destroy my wife. She wasn't the right woman for you. She was carrying my child when I sent her out of my house in the rain. Each word landed separately, like stones dropped into deep water. She was pregnant, alone, in a country she had moved to for me, and you made sure I threw her away. Mina stepped back. Something shifted in her face. Maybe the first honest thing he'd ever seen there. Something that looked almost like the beginning of shame. But it was too late for that. Far, far too late. My lawyers will be in contact with yours, he said. Don't leave the country. He went to Sasha's hotel that night. Her team tried to stop him at the lobby, politely, firmly, in the way of people trained to protect someone important. He asked them to let her know he was there. He waited. 40 minutes in a hotel lobby armchair, watched by security, and by the curious glances of people who recognized him. Then she came. She was in simple clothes, a silk blouse, tailored trousers, no gown, no event armor. This was the real Sasha, the private one. And somehow, she was even more devastating like this. She sat down across from him without greeting him, without offering anything, and she waited. He leaned forward. His hands were clasped. He had given speeches to thousands of people. He had no idea how to begin. Is Amara my daughter? He asked. Sasha looked at him for a long, still moment. He could hear his own heartbeat. Yes, she said. One word. Quiet and absolute. The silence that followed lasted long enough that a couple at a nearby table finished their drinks and left. Jae-hyun sat in that silence and let it crush him the way it deserved to. I know the truth, he finally said. About the documents. About Mina. About... He stopped. About my mother. Something moved across Sasha's face. It was there and gone quickly. But he caught it. Pain, old and deep. The kind that doesn't announce itself anymore because it's been lived with so long it becomes part of the body. Good, she said quietly. Then you know I never betrayed you. I know. He looked at her. I knew you. I always knew you. And I chose not to trust what I knew. Yes. She didn't say it with cruelty. She said it the way a doctor names a disease. Clearly, because clarity is the only kindness available. You did. I'm sorry, Sasha. Don't. Her voice was still quiet, but something edged into it. Don't apologize the way people apologize when they want forgiveness immediately. I've been waiting 3 years for that word, and it still isn't enough. Not tonight. He nodded. He didn't deserve enough. He knew that. You humiliated me, she continued. Her hands were folded in her lap, perfectly still. In front of cameras, you stood up in front of your entire world and told them I was a thief. My name was in every newspaper. People I had worked with my entire career called to ask if it was true. My mother called me from Lagos to ask if it was true. A pause. I was 2 months pregnant and sitting alone in an apartment in London, watching my name be destroyed. And I couldn't even call you because the number you'd had for 2 years had already been disconnected. He didn't look away from her. She deserved to be looked at while she said this. I built something, she said, not to prove a point to you. I want you to understand that. I built it because Amara needed a mother who hadn't given up. I built it because I had to survive. She finally looked directly at him, and the steadiness in her eyes broke something loose in his chest. But if you think that means I haven't thought about what you did, what it cost me, you're wrong. I don't think that, he said. I think about it every day. Then think about it a little longer, she said. She stood up. If you want to meet Amara, formally, properly, then ask through Daniel. I won't keep you from your daughter. But Jae-hyun, she said his name for the first time, and he felt it like a wound reopening. Don't mistake being a father for being forgiven. They're not the same thing. She walked away. He sat in the lobby long after she was gone. He reached Amara through Daniel, carefully, through conversations that Daniel made very clear were not an endorsement of anything. He arrived the first Saturday with a stuffed penguin. He'd asked Sasha's assistant what Amara liked, having no other way to know, and the assistant had said, penguins and anything purple, and stood at the door of Sasha's serviced apartment, feeling more nervous than he had at any point in his professional life. Amara opened the door. She looked up at him with those eyes, his eyes, in her face, and tilted her head. You're the man from the party. Yes. Mommy said you're no one I need to worry about. He crouched down to her level. Your mommy was right, he said. But I brought you something. He held out the penguin. Amara studied it. Then she studied him. The evaluation of a 3-year-old is one of the most honest things in the world. No politics, no history, no agenda. Just a child deciding whether you are safe. She took the penguin. His name is Bomi, she announced. That's a good name. I named him already. She turned and walked back into the apartment, clearly expecting him to follow. Sasha was in the kitchen, watching. She said nothing. She let it happen. He came back the following Saturday, and the one after that. He sat on the floor with Amara and assembled a toy kitchen set. Following instructions, he kept reading backward. He went to her ballet class, not inside, just standing at the door, where the glass panel gave a narrow view of small children in pink shoes, shuffling through positions, and watched his daughter concentrate, with her little brow furrowed exactly the way he furrowed his. He brought purple flowers. He learned that Amara's favorite song was one Sasha had sung to her since birth, a Yoruba lullaby he couldn't pronounce, but asked Sasha to write down phonetically so he could learn it. Sasha watched all of this with the careful, measured attention of a woman who had been fooled once and would never be fooled again. But she watched, and slowly, very slowly, something in her posture when he arrived began to soften by a fraction that he probably wasn't supposed to notice. He noticed. And then Mina, desperate and cornered and about to lose everything, made one final move. It started on a Thursday night when a story appeared on one of Korea's most widely read entertainment portals. Anonymous sources. salacious headline. The story claimed that Sasha Brooks had deliberately timed her return to Korea to trap Jae-hyun Park using their daughter. That she had hidden the pregnancy as leverage. That Amara, the brand, the company, was built on money secretly skimmed from Park Holdings accounts during the marriage. By Friday morning, it had been picked up by 12 other outlets. By Friday afternoon, the hashtags were trending. Some people pushed back. Many did not. And among those who did not, the attacks on Sasha took a shape that had nothing to do with the corporate allegations. They were racial, vicious, the kind of language that doesn't disguise what it really is. Sasha handled it publicly, with a stillness that impressed even Daniel, who had seen her handle a great deal. She released a brief, precise statement through her legal team and said nothing more. But Amara, on Saturday morning, asked why people on the internet were saying mean things about Mommy. Sasha had not known she had seen it. A friend's older sibling had shown the comments to the children at ballet class, casually, without understanding, and Amara, 3 years old, and newly literate enough to recognize her mother's name, had asked what the words meant. Sasha sat on the kitchen floor with her daughter and held her and didn't cry until Amara was asleep. Jae-hyun found out from Daniel, who called him with a voice stripped of all the careful diplomacy he'd been maintaining for weeks. Your ex-mistress just put racist attacks on a 3-year-old's mother. And that little girl is asking why people hate her mommy. You need to do something. Today. Jae-hyun had already been on the phone with his legal team for 2 hours. But the moment he heard about Amara, about his daughter sitting in a ballet class, hearing cruelty about the person she loved most in the world, something shifted in him that was permanent. Not rage. Rage was what he'd built his coldness out of for years. This was different. This was grief converting itself into resolve the way only the deepest grief can. He called a press conference for the following Monday. His communications team prepared a careful, corporate statement. Jae-hyun read it once, set it down, and wrote his own. Madam Park arrived at his office on Sunday night. She stood in the doorway in a dark coat, her posture still impeccable, her face carrying the beginnings of something she had been fighting all weekend, the recognition that she had gone too far. Jae-hyun, she said, the conference tomorrow is happening. Think about what you're exposing. The family name. I'm not thinking about the family name. He looked at her. I'm thinking about a 3-year-old who went to ballet class and came home crying. Your granddaughter, Iyama. Your granddaughter cried because of what you helped put into motion 3 years ago. Madam Park's composure cracked. Just slightly. Just enough. Her hand came up to her mouth. I loved Sasha, he said. He hadn't said it out loud in years. The word felt different now, heavier and truer. I was too proud and too foolish and too accustomed to doing what you expected of me to fight for her when it mattered. That is my failure. But you, he stopped, breathed. You chose hatred over your own son's happiness. I need you to sit with that. He walked out. The press conference was held in Park Holdings' main conference room, with a full media contingent. Cameras lined the back wall. Reporters filled every seat. Jae-hyun arrived without a prepared statement visible, sat down at the single microphone, and waited for the room to settle. Then he spoke. He started with the evidence. The fabricated documents, the staged photographs, the corporate crimes Mina had committed, the shell companies, the bribed reporters. He laid it out in the methodical, precise way of a man who had spent his career dismantling complex problems, and the room became very still as the scale of it became clear. Then he stopped being precise. 3 years ago, he said, I stood up in front of cameras and accused an innocent woman of things she had never done. I did it publicly because I was too proud to be wrong quietly. I didn't investigate. I didn't trust the person I had promised to trust above anyone else. I chose my pride over my marriage, and I told myself I was being decisive. He paused. I was being a coward. A murmur ran through the room. Sasha Brooks did not steal from me. She did not betray me. She left my house in the rain, carrying a child she had no obligation to tell me about, given how I'd treated her. And she built something extraordinary from nothing, because she is an extraordinary person. The attacks on her character and on her daughter, that appeared this week. They are lies, and they were manufactured by someone who has now been referred to prosecutors. He looked directly into the cameras. The greatest mistake of my life was failing the woman I loved. I intend to spend whatever time she allows me trying to be worthy of the damage I caused. The room erupted. Mina was arrested the following week on charges of corporate fraud, document forgery, and defamation. The case was airtight. Madam Park, faced with Mrs. O's sworn statement and the full weight of her son's quiet, terrible disappointment, did something that surprised everyone who knew her. She asked to meet Sasha privately. No lawyers, no cameras, just two women in a hotel room, one of whom had spent years trying to break the other. None of them ever disclosed what was said in that room. But Madam Park was seen, 2 days later, in the lobby of Amara's ballet school, sitting in a plastic chair among other grandmothers, watching her granddaughter point her small foot and try to hold a pose. Sasha had allowed it. That was all anyone needed to know about the kind of woman Sasha was. But forgiveness is not the same as return. Sasha had said that herself, and she meant it. She finished her Korean launch, closed her business meetings, signed her distribution, contracts, and began preparing to return to London. Life here was not her life anymore. She had come to open a chapter, not to reopen a wound. Jae-hyun knew she was leaving. He knew the flight. He did not know if showing up at the airport was the right thing or merely the dramatic thing, but he had spent 3 years being a man who chose restraint and dignity over honesty, and look where that had gotten him. He arrived with purple flowers, Amara's favorite color, because he was smart enough to know that if Amara was on his side, he had at least a chance. He found them near the departure gates. Sasha crouched with her luggage cart, while Amara explained something important about Bomi, the penguin's feelings regarding airport escalators. Sasha stood when she saw him. Her face was composed, careful, reading the situation. Daniel, standing a few feet behind her, looked at Jae-hyun with an expression that said, "Don't waste this." Amara, on the other hand, said, "Jae-hyun," with total joy, and ran to him. He caught her. He held her. This small, warm, impossibly real person who was half of him. And for a moment, he just breathed. Then he set her down gently and looked at Sasha. "I'm not here to beg," he said. "I know," she said. "I know I don't deserve another chance." He held out the flowers, not as a romantic gesture, but as something simpler, more honest, the way you might extend a hand across a wide distance. I know that love isn't enough on its own. I know I proved that. But I've been doing a lot of thinking about what love actually is. He paused. I think it's not the way I felt about you at the beginning. Wanting you, needing you, being proud to have you beside me. That was real, but it was also selfish. It was about what having you gave me. His voice dropped slightly. What I feel now is different. I want you to be safe. I want Amara to grow up knowing her father is a man worth knowing. I want to watch your company grow and not need any credit for it. I want to sit in the corner of your life and make sure nothing hurts you without asking you to look at me while I do it. A long pause. If love means protecting you instead of controlling you, then let me spend whatever years you give me proving I've changed. Sasha looked at him, The airport moved around them. Announcements in 3 languages, rolling luggage, families saying goodbye. She was still so composed. That composure, he had finally understood, was not coldness. It was a woman who had learned that feeling everything in public was too dangerous. The feeling was there. He could see it at the edges. "You broke me, Jae-hyun." Her voice was steady. Not dramatically. Not in one moment. "You broke me slowly. And then publicly. And then, you left me to build myself back up alone." She exhaled. "I'm not broken anymore. I need you to understand that. Whatever happens, I'm not broken. I don't need you." "I know," he said. "I'm not asking you to need me. I'm asking you to choose me. When you're whole. Because you want to. Not because you're afraid to be alone, or because I've worn you down. Because you want to." A long silence. Then Amara, 3 years old, unaware of the weight of adult histories, operating purely on instinct and love, reached up and took her mother's hand. Then she reached up and took Jae-hyun's hand, and she pressed them together. "Don't be sad," she instructed both of them firmly. "Bomi says everyone should stay." Sasha looked down at her daughter for a moment. Then she looked up at Jae-hyun. And something in her, the last defended wall, the final rampart she had built not out of cruelty, but out of pure necessity, shifted, not crumbled. Shifted, like a door not swinging open, but unlocking. "I'm not ready to come back," she said quietly. "I want to be clear about that. I understand. But—" She stopped, exhaled. "I'm willing to let you show me you mean it. Slowly. On my terms." She looked at him steadily. "And Jae-hyun, if you ever make my daughter cry, not a toddler tantrum, I mean if you ever fail her the way you failed me, this conversation ends permanently. There is no third meeting." "I know," he said. "I know that." She nodded. Once. And she took the flowers. Amara cheered. They did not leave together that day. Sasha still got on her flight to London because her life was her life, and it existed on its own terms now. But Jae-hyun was on a flight the following weekend. And the one after. He was not present in the dramatic way of movie heroes. He did not show up constantly, crowd her space, overwhelm her with gestures. He came when he was welcome. He sent things when distance didn't permit presence. He video called a